Greetings and welcome to the Elevation Report with myself, Karema Fakara, on SOEM, the Spirit of Elevation Media. And now today on this episode, we have some deeply sad news coming from Tanzania. And sad for Tanzania, but also sad for the whole continent of Africa, and really sad for the entire world. And this is really a devastating blow, and it's sad for anyone who's out there fighting for freedom, for civil liberties, and for sovereignty to make simply our own decisions. Our own decisions based on our own health. What we decide we want to wear or do not want to wear. What we decide we want to put into our own bodies. How we decide to raise our children. Whether or not we decide to open or close our business. How we decide to run our business. How we decide to interact with society. So many freedoms and civil liberties that have been infringed upon, to the point now where the sovereignty to govern your country how you see fit has become under threat. Today we hear news that President John Magufuli of Tanzania has died at the age 61.
The truth is there for whom has eyes to see it. And who has ears to hear, let them hear.
President John Magufuli of Tanzania has died at the age of 61. The Vice President has announced that John Magufuli died on the 17th of March 2021 from heart complications in a hospital in Dar es Salaam. His death comes 1 month after Tanzania refused to purchase COVID-19 vaccinations. On the 2nd of February, the health minister announced that the country has no plans to accept the COVID-19 vaccine. Dorothy Gwajima went on to explain, "We are not yet satisfied that those vaccines have been clinically proven safe." At a news conference surrounded by government officials not wearing masks or social distancing, President John Magufuli expressed doubt about the vaccine sourced from abroad. He said the health ministry will only adopt vaccinations after they have been certified by Tanzania's own health experts. Also at the news conference, Dorothy Gwajima and the health officials demonstrated a natural remedy for immune support by drinking a herbal infusion which included ginger, garlic, and lemons, and also inhaling steam from boiling herbs. This was to demonstrate to the Tanzanian population that there are alternative ways in which you can boost your immune system and fight against respiratory illnesses such as COVID-19. 1 year ago, President Magufuli made global news coverage after dismissing the COVID PCR test as faulty after testing them on a goat and a papaya. Many of us will remember this comical event where President Magufuli tested the PCR test on a goat and a papaya and the results came back positive. So either our fruits are passing on the virus, or Magufuli was actually correct in stating that this test was faulty. As popular as this story was, in my opinion, it wasn't popular enough. I mean, this should have really concluded that these tests are inaccurate and stopped the global testing from that moment there. But no, the mainstream media consistently underreported and continues to underreport these types of stories from Tanzania and any other nation who is going against the grain. Then in the summer, when international travel began to open up again, those who were looking at traveling to any of the African nations would have noticed that almost every African nation had implemented some of the strictest travel restrictions in the world. and this is despite having some of the lowest cases in the world. Some of those nations who were opening up for tourism were indeed requiring negative PCR tests upon arrival. Some nations were actually requiring for a negative PCR test in order to travel, and then asking for another PCR test to be done upon arrival, and some were even holding people's passports so they could take another test within 7 days' time, and they would only get that passport back once a negative test result had been given on that 7th day. It's only now that we are seeing these types of travel restrictions happening in Europe, which has some of the highest cases and deaths according to the figures of each of those nations who are publishing those statistics. Tanzania was one of the only African nations not to impose such restrictions. Their entry requirement stated that you may be asked to take a test if you are showing symptoms. Back in the day of common sense, this would have been considered a fair policy. However, in 2021, the mainstream media have begun tarnishing him as reckless. Tanzania became a hotspot for diasporans who were seeking an exit from Europe and the States in order to return to Africa, and especially for those that could see where the global travel restrictions were leading to and seeking a move before they tightened even more with the release of a vaccination. Many were documenting their relocation and repatriation on YouTube. The US and UK embassies responded to this by putting in place a policy that if you were flying out of the US or the UK, you would still be required to take a PCR test, despite the Tanzanian government stating themselves that it was not required for entry into Tanzania. Now let's make something clear here. This is a time where you could travel to Italy or Spain or many places in Europe that were hotspots for the pandemic and not be required to take a PCR test. So why Tanzania? Could it be the African nations are being pressured and even paid off to impose these tight and strict travel restrictions? Let me know what you think in the comments. Pre-COVID, President Magufuli won early praise for tackling corruption and reducing wasteful government spending and improving the lives of poor farmers by waiving dozens of taxes. He also spearheaded the development for new transport links, power plants, and more than 1,700 health centers. Investments that helped Tanzania's economy become one of the world's top performers. Magufuli also drove through controversial reforms aimed at ensuring the nation derived greater benefit from its natural resources, which put his administration on a collision course with foreign mining companies. In 2017, the authorities asked Barrick Gold Corp's local units to pay a whopping $190 billion tax bill, a dispute that was eventually settled by paying $300 million and creating a mining joint venture with the state. How many groups, organizations have been shouting and screaming for the longest time for governments to ensure that large corporations and global nationals are paying their fair share of tax? Here we have a president that was doing just that. And where was his name in mainstream news? He wasn't mentioned. These things were not heard about unless you dug deep to search for them. Looking at a lot of the news stories that have come out since his death, many of them focus on him being a COVID skeptic. This is what you will find even in the headlines of some of the stories, and indeed in the first few paragraphs. It's not until the end of some of these articles that you will come to find out about some of Magufuli's achievements in the nation. And so I think it's important that these achievements are highlighted and reported on, because if it doesn't fit the narrative, the mainstream media are very careful to pick and choose what they want to display. Last year, he secured a second 5-year term in October when he garnered 84% of the vote, the widest victory margin of any presidential campaign in almost 3 decades of multi-party elections in Tanzania. During the election period, Tanzanian health authorities said medicines worth 26.7 billion Tanzanian shillings, about 11.5 million US dollars, were stolen from public hospitals between July 2019 and December 2020. Stealing medicines worth 26.7 billion Tanzanian shillings in just a year and a half amounts to sabotage, said Dorothy Gwajima, the Minister for Health. So it appears that just like President Nkurunziza of neighboring Burundi, who also died of heart problems, also just after winning a re-election and after being the only nation to not impose a lockdown and keep the country open for business, Magufuli had forces that were working against him that did not want him winning a second term. President Magufuli, we salute you for your efforts and courageousness to be an example of a true leader. May the love the people had for you, like many other leaders of the people, inspire the next generation of leaders to be as courageous in holding their principles and dignity by doing what they know to be right for their people, despite the pressure of the enemies that are seeking our destruction. President Magufuli, rest in peace. Until next time, thank you for watching.